first we have attitude. So attitude is defined as the expression of a feeling towards a subject. Very vague, very like general, non-specific definition. Just an expression of a feeling towards something. There are three main components that make up attitude that we consider for the MCAT. There's the affective, the behavioral, and the cognitive aspects. An easy way to remember them is the ABC, right? Affective, behavioral, and cognitive, ABC approach to attitude. And we'll go over each one of these three, okay? So first up is affective. So affective is the emotional component of attitude. It's just how you feel about a certain subject, and in order to be effective, you have to have some kind of, it has to be tied to some kind of emotion or some kind of feeling, right? It's not like an action or anything like that. It's just an emotion, right? So for example, I'm gonna have an example that I'm gonna come back to for all three components. So there's a negative example and a positive example, because you can have a negative attitude towards something and you can have a positive attitude towards something, which I'm sure many of you experienced both of these in your lives to different things. First is the negative example. So the affective component of your attitude towards spiders, which could be something that most people are negative towards or have a negative attitude towards. It could be spiders are scary. This is affective because it only conveys an emotion or a feeling, fear. So your feeling towards the subject, spiders, is spiders are scary. They make me feel fear. A positive example could be something like your attitude towards your friend. I'm assuming most of you like your friends and have a positive attitude towards your friends. So the affective component of your attitude towards your friend could be, my friend makes me happy. Again, we're looking at, for affective component, we're looking at an emotion or a feeling towards the subject. In this case, the emotion is happiness, and it's directed towards your friend. Okay, very simple so far. Next is the behavior component, the second component of attitude. The behavioral component is how we actually behave with respect to the subject in question. It refers to physical actions. And this is a big part of the difference between attitude and behavior. According to this ABC definition of attitude, behavior is a part of attitude, but it is not attitude itself. And the main difference is that attitude is your overall feeling or your overall feeling or action towards an object, whereas behavior is just how you behave, like how you act, how you physically act towards a certain subject, right? It's kind of hard to explain without using these words, but hopefully you guys get the gist. So going back to our negative and positive examples, for behavioral component, your negative behavioral component of attitude towards spiders, for example, could be when you see a spider, you either run away from it or you can try and kill it, right? That's when you see a spider, any kind of bug, that might be how you behave towards it, what you physically do. The positive friend example, what you physically do or your actual actions is you try and talk with them, spend time with them, hang out with them, do more activities together with that person, right? And that's how you actually behave and act. The last component is cognitive, and the cognitive component is essentially how you connect the previous two components in your mind. So we have a feeling or an emotion, and we have an action. But in order to really tie these together and make one cohesive thing called attitude, we need something to kind of bridge the gap. Cognitive is essentially a justification of your affect. So while affect is simply the emotion towards a subject, cognitive is the logical reason for such an attitude, right? For your actions, for your feelings in your affect, it's actually the logical reasoning and the justification that you have for your attitude. For example, now we want to bring everything together since we've talked about all three parts. We'll go to the negative spider example. you're afraid of spiders. That's the A component, affective. You feel fear towards a subject because they can be poisonous or they can damage you in some way. That would be the cognitive. It's the logical reason. Your fear that you feel, the affect, is justified through this cognitive because they can be dangerous, they can be poisonous, they can do whatever. Or actually venomous, not poisonous, but regardless, they can be dangerous. So either you run away or you kill them in order to avoid being bitten or hurt in any way. And that's the behavioral component, the actual action. You feel an emotion, you feel because you feel an emotion for this reason, and in order to counteract that emotion, you perform some action, right? In order to get away from that emotion or to kind of satisfy that emotion. In this case, it's to get away from it or to conquer it. In other examples, it may be to kind of like go and coincide with it. For your friend example, the positive example, your friend makes you happy. Again, that's the affective component. You feel happiness, you feel an emotion towards a subject, which is your friend, because you have fun together, you enjoy the time you spent with them. That's the logical reason. When I spend time with them, I have fun, I enjoy myself, I learn new things or whatever it is with your friend. And that's like the logical, factual reason that you feel that emotion when you're with them or towards them, that you feel happy or you feel love or you feel some kind of emotion towards your friend because you enjoy spending time together. Because of this, you choose to talk with them or hang out with them when possible. That's the actual action. You have an emotion, happiness or love or whatever. Sorry. Sorry about that. You have an emotion, happiness or love or whatever. It's justified because of your cognitive aspect of attitude. You have fun together, you learn new things, you enjoy spending time with them. And because of that, you act on that emotion. And for that reason, you perform some kind of action. You talk with them, hang out with them, do whatever with them. Okay. So if you just combine all three components, this can essentially be described as an attitude. This whole thing, it covers every aspect of attitude. Usually, an attitude may be a little bit more kind of further developed, but this is kind of like the streamlined version of, according to the ABC definition of attitude, this is basically it. So I'm going to start the poll. Okay, so the majority of people picked choice B, with second place being choice C. So I would narrow it down to those, but however, I think the correct answer is actually choice C. The reason is, so firstly, going over these, it's not attentive because that wasn't part of the three aspects of attitude. It's not affective because it's not really dealing with specifically an emotion. It is dealing with your attitude towards chimps, but not really your emotional attitude, whether you love them, hate them, or afraid of them, whatever. That could be part of the attitude, but it's not exactly, that's not how you would exactly test it. Something that would test the affective would be more like, are you afraid of chimps or something like that. Now between B and C, so the reason it's not B is because it's really hard to, through a survey, to test for your behavioral aspect of attitude, right? Because like I mentioned, behavior is an action. So the way you would test usually a behavioral aspect is by having somebody actually perform some kind of action or some kind of physical thing, right? It wouldn't really be by doing a survey. The reason it's C, cognitive, is because if you have had, in your previous experience, if you had some negative negative experience with chimps in the past, for example, the only time you've ever seen a chimp before, it was very violent, it was very aggressive, it was hostile, and it was dangerous, right? If that was your only exposure to chimps in the past, that was your previous experience, which is what the question's asking, or the survey is asking in the question, then you would have logically, you would say, well, my previous experience was that they're violent, that they're aggressive. So because of that, I have a negative attitude towards them. It's the cognitive aspect, because you're deciding whether logically you should or should not be afraid, or logically if you should or should not approach this with a negative or positive attitude, right? If, for example, the only exposure or the previous experience you've had with chimps is very positive, you found them to be very cute, very loving, very very nice, essentially, or you just had positive experiences with them in the past, logically you would conclude that you should have a positive attitude towards them because they're nice animals, essentially. And you would have, through the cognitive aspect, you would have a positive attitude just based on your previous experience, right? So usually surveys can either ask for affective or cognitive. They usually won't ask, it won't be behavioral. Behavioral will usually be something that you can actually act upon, or that has you actually doing something. And we'll go over more of that when we talk about therapies in this lecture a little bit later, right? There's a lot of therapies that involve behavioral exercises, but surveys are usually not one of them. Those are usually more cognitive, or sometimes they can be affective depending on what question they're asking, if they're talking more about emotions or logic. Okay, in this case, it's talking more about logic. So it would be C.